At 7 minutes past 10, on a warm June night in South Carolina, a 911 dispatcher picks up a call from a hunting estate called Moselle. The man on the line is breathing hard. He says he needs police and an ambulance, fast. He says his wife and his son have been shot, and that neither of them is moving. The man crying into that phone is Alex Murdaugh, one of the most connected lawyers in the state. Within hours, investigators are standing over 2 bodies at the dog kennels, 600 yards from the main house. And Alex tells them, clearly and repeatedly, one simple thing. He was never down at those kennels that night. Not once. He'd been napping at the house, then visiting his elderly mother. He arrived back, found them, and called for help. It was a clean story. It made him a grieving husband and father, not a suspect. And for more than a year, there was no way to prove otherwise. But the whole time, sitting in an evidence locker, was a locked iPhone that had been lying in his dead son's pocket. Inside it was 50 seconds of video that would take his alibi apart, almost to the minute. This is how they caught him lying. To understand why this case shook South Carolina, you have to understand what the name Murdaugh meant there. For nearly a century, from 1920 to 2006, one family held the office of chief prosecutor across 5 counties of the South Carolina Lowcountry. Great-grandfather, grandfather, father. 3 generations of Murdaughs decided who got charged and who walked, across an area bigger than some states. Locals called the region Murdaugh country, and they were only half joking. When the family finally gave up the prosecutor's office, they kept the next best thing, a powerful injury law firm founded by the same dynasty, and a courthouse where a portrait of Alex's great-grandfather literally hung on the wall. Alex Murdaugh was the 4th generation. Big, red-haired, relentlessly friendly, the kind of man who knew every judge, every sheriff, every clerk by first name. He had a wife, Maggie, 2 sons, Buster and Paul, a beach house in Moselle, 1,700 acres of fields, woods, and swamp, with a shooting range and a kennel full of hunting dogs. From the outside, it looked untouchable. Inside, by June 2021, almost none of it was real. The money was vanishing, the law firm was quietly asking questions, and the family was 2 years deep into a scandal that had already put the Murdaugh name in headlines for the worst possible reason. That scandal started on a cold night in February 2019, when a boat full of teenagers slammed into a bridge piling near Paris Island. The boat belonged to the Murdaughs. Witnesses said 19-year-old Paul Murdaugh was drunk at the wheel. One of the passengers, a 19-year-old girl named Mallory Beach, was thrown into the dark water. Her body wasn't found for a week. Paul was charged with boating under the influence causing death. He faced up to 25 years. And the Beach family's lawyers did something dangerous. They started pulling on the Murdaugh family's finances to see what a wrongful death jury could actually win. Depositions were coming. Bank records were coming. For a man whose entire life was built on money that wasn't his, discovery wasn't just embarrassing. It was fatal. Because here is what almost nobody knew on the night of June 7, 2021. Alex Murdaugh had been stealing. Not skimming. Stealing on an industrial scale. For more than a decade, he had diverted settlement money that belonged to his own clients, including the sons of his dead housekeeper, into fake accounts he controlled. The total would eventually be counted in the millions, close to $9 million. That very morning, June 7th, the chief financial officer of his own law firm had confronted him about $792,000 in missing fees. The walls were closing in from every direction at once. That is the man who called 911 that night. Now walk through the evening the way Alex first told it. He said he spent time at the house with Maggie and Paul, then lay down on the couch and fell asleep. He never went down to the kennels. Around 9, he got up and drove to Alameda, 20 minutes away, to check on his mother, who has advanced dementia, and her caregiver. He drove home, pulled up to the kennels around 10, found Maggie and Paul, touched them to check for breathing, and called 911. He told that story to deputies that night. He told it to state investigators 3 days later, on camera, in a recorded interview. He was specific. He was consistent. And there was no witness alive who could contradict him. Maggie had been shot multiple times with a rifle. Paul had been shot twice with a shotgun. The only 3 people at those kennels that night were, by his account, the 2 victims and whoever killed them. Investigators had a problem. They had no murder weapon, no confession, no eyewitness, and a family with a century of law enforcement connections. What they had was electronics. Everyone at Moselle that night was carrying a phone, and the property itself was full of machines that quietly record everything. A Chevy Suburban with a data system, security steps, texts, app logs. The case would live or die on timestamps. Paul's iPhone was found on his body. It was locked. And this is where the story turns, because the most important piece of evidence in the entire case sat unreadable for months. Investigators sent the phone to the Secret Service. Nothing. The passcode held. Months passed. Then an examiner tried something almost embarrassingly simple, variations of Paul's old codes, including one final guess before the phone would have started locking them out for good. It opened, and inside, in the camera roll, was a video, timestamped 8:44 and 55 seconds on the night of the murders. 50 seconds long. Filmed by Paul, at the kennels, minutes before he died. Play it, and you hear dogs barking. Paul is trying to film a friend's dog, a chocolate lab named Cash, because something is wrong with its tail. You hear Paul's voice. You hear a family friend's dog rattling in a cage. And then, in the background, clear as day, you hear a third voice. A man calling out to one of the dogs, a chicken in its mouth. 2 words in a booming Lowcountry drawl. Investigators played that video for people who had known the family their whole lives. Witness after witness, young men who had hunted and fished with the Murdaughs for years, gave the same answer without hesitation. That third voice was Alex Murdaugh. The man who swore, on camera, that he was never at the kennels that night, was at the kennels, on camera, at 8:44 p.m. And the timestamps around that video turned it from embarrassing into devastating. At 8:49 p.m., 5 minutes after the video, Maggie's phone and Paul's phone went silent at the same time. Not quiet. Dead. Paul's phone locked and never recorded another human touch. Maggie's phone stopped, then registered its screen coming on and off as it was carried, before it was thrown into the brush along the road leading away from Moselle, where searchers found it the next day. Investigators believe that within those 5 minutes, both of them were killed. Now look at Alex's phone in the same window. From 8:09 to 9:02 p.m., nothing. No steps, no calls, no touches, for almost an hour, at exactly the time of the murders. A living man's phone, held by a man who claimed to be napping and moving around the house, recording nothing at all. Then, at 9:02, it wakes up, and it explodes with activity. In 4 minutes, Alex's phone records more steps than it had all evening, as if its owner was suddenly moving fast. Calls start going out, to Maggie's phone, which is lying in the woods, to friends, to family. At 9:06, the Suburban's own data system logs him starting the car and driving to his mother's house in Alameda, exactly the alibi trip he described, except it begins after his wife and son have stopped answering forever. The car logs something else, too. On the drive, the data shows the Suburban slowing near the very stretch of road where Maggie's phone was later found in the brush. The prosecution argued the timeline now wrote itself, in the machine's own words. At 8:44, Alex is at the kennels with Maggie and Paul. At 8:49, their phones go dark forever. For the next 13 minutes, his phone records nothing. At 9:02, it comes alive. At 9:06, he drives to Alameda to see his mother for barely 20 minutes, manufacturing the alibi in real time. And at 10:07, after returning, he makes the 911 call, sobbing that he just found them. The defense fought every inference. They pointed out, correctly, that no forensic evidence tied Alex to the shootings themselves. No confession, no weapon recovered, no blood spatter case that held up. But the kennel video did not need forensics. It only needed his own words. And while investigators were still building that timeline, Alex Murdaugh did something that told the world who they were dealing with. 3 months after the murders, on a September afternoon, he called 911 again. This time he said he'd been shot in the head by a stranger on a roadside. It quickly fell apart. Alex admitted he had arranged the whole thing. He'd given a former client a gun and asked to be shot, so that his surviving son could collect a $10 million life insurance payout. The suicide for hire failed. The bullet only grazed him. Within days, the law firm went public about the stolen money. The state bar suspended him, and the millions in client thefts began surfacing, one victim at a time. The grieving widower was now, on the record, a man capable of staging his own shooting and lying to 911 about it. When the murder trial finally opened in January 2023, in the same Hampton County courthouse where his great-grandfather's portrait had hung, the state's case was the timeline, the video, and the money. A man about to be exposed, prosecutors argued, who sacrificed his family to buy sympathy and time. The defense called it a theory without a weapon. And then Alex Murdaugh did the one thing nobody expected. He took the stand. On direct examination, he was warm, tearful, folksy. And then, under oath, he finally answered the question the kennel video had been asking for a year and a half. Were you there? Yes. He admitted it. He was at the kennels at 8:44. The voice on the video was his. He had lied to the police that night, lied in his recorded interviews, lied for 20 months, he said, because opioid addiction had made him paranoid and he didn't trust the investigators. He insisted he left his family alive and happy at the kennels and knew nothing of the murders. The prosecutor's cross-examination was surgical. If he could lie to deputies, to his partners, to his clients, to his own family, for years, effortlessly, why would a jury believe the crying man in front of them now? The jury heard closing arguments on March 2, 2023. They came back in less than 3 hours, guilty of both murders. The next morning, a judge who had once had that Murdaugh portrait taken down from the courtroom wall sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms. It looked like the end of the story. It wasn't. In 2024, evidence emerged that the county clerk of court, the elected official responsible for protecting the jury, had privately urged jurors not to trust Murdaugh's testimony and had been chasing a book deal about the trial. The fight over her conduct went up the appellate ladder, and in 2026 the South Carolina Supreme Court threw out the convictions, ruling that the jury tampering was too serious to ignore. A retrial is now set for the spring of 2027. Murdaugh, meanwhile, is not going anywhere. He is already serving decades in prison after admitting, in open court, to stealing from client after client, the same thefts that gave the murder case its motive. So the legal story will be argued again. But the evidence that broke the case does not reset with the verdict. The video on Paul's phone still exists, with a third voice on it that Alex has now admitted is his. The phone still went silent at 8:49. His phone still slept through the murder window and woke at 9:02. The Suburban's data still shows the drive, minute by minute. Whatever a second jury decides, one thing was settled the moment that locked iPhone finally opened. The alibi that made Alex Murdaugh a grieving bystander was written by Alex Murdaugh. The record written by the machines told a different story, and machines were the one audience in the Lowcountry that the Murdaugh name could not charm, could not pressure, and could not outtalk. For 100 years, his family decided what the truth was in that corner of South Carolina. In the end, the truth was decided by a phone that refused to forget, in the pocket of the son he swore he never saw that night. If this breakdown of the evidence kept you watching, the channel is full of cases like this. How investigators use the smallest details, a timestamp, a fiber, a receipt, to take apart a perfect story. Subscribe, and you'll see the next one.